Let's bring her in now, contributing writer at Politico magazine, veteran political analyst Jeff Greenfield, also senior political columnist for Politico, Jonathan Martin, and also the co-host of MSNBC's The Weekend, Simone Sanders Townsend, Jonathan Lemire, and Elise Jordan, also back with us. Jonathan Martin, let's begin with you. Reaction from Milwaukee, reaction from the RNC from everything we're hearing from Biden world.
Well, I think that there is an extraordinary scene, Joe, that we have not seen in modern American politics, which is one party's convention on the verge of being totally eclipsed by the other party. The chatter in and around the convention last night was not about J.D. Vance's speech. It was, holy, you know what? Biden may be forced to drop out, and plotting as to what the implications of that are, how soon he could go, and then whether or not he lays hands on his VP to try to anoint her as his successor, and then ultimately what their convention in Chicago looks like. That is the conversation here, at least with the political pros. Now, the delegates obviously are still enraptured by all things MAGA, but, Joe, the operative class here is transfixed by this story taking place among Democrats.
Right. You know, Jonathan, we have been quoting you, so this might be like a funny Winston Churchill quote. But if you never really said this, I'd take credit for it because I like it. You say Donald Trump used to split Republicans and unite Democrats. Now it's the opposite. He's uniting Republicans and dividing Democrats. Talk about the second part of that equation, just how divided Democrats are, and you're reporting on Nancy Pelosi, what she's been doing, and how much longer this can continue.
Joe, I think that there's going to be books written someday about the arc of Nancy Pelosi's career. I think this will be at least a couple of chapters. The former Speaker of the House, and somebody who, by the way, when she was going to retire after the 2022 midterms, Biden talked to her on the phone and suggested that she not retire and she stay as Speaker. Now, less than 2 years later, she is in some ways leading the plot against her friend, and as Biden calls her, his Catholic sister, and trying to get him off the ballot. Look, it's no accident that Adam Schiff went on Meet the Press. It's no accident that Adam Schiff yesterday came out with a statement fully calling for Biden to drop out of the race. He's a key Pelosi lieutenant. And so I think what's happening here is that she, along with other high-ranking Democrats, Joe, are convinced that there's no path for Biden to win this fall. And as important, he will take down other Democrats on the ballot with him and are trying to get him off the ballot without publicly calling for him to drop out of the race, but doing everything just short of that. It's been a 3-week campaign. Obviously, Biden is dug in, but they're now turned into extreme measures. Look at what happened yesterday, that flurry of leaks that came out in about a 5-hour period, all designed to increase the pressure on Biden to ensure, Joe, that he can't run out the clock, which has been his strategy for the last couple of weeks here. So we're now in, I think, the critical hours of this campaign, this private campaign to force Biden off the ballot. And I think between now and the 1st of August is going to be crunch time.
So, Jeff Greenfield, I was on the show from Atlanta the morning after the debate, and a couple Democrats had told me overnight that in the wake of that disastrous performance, they believed President Biden would stay in. He'd fight. The one thing they said that could change his mind would be if congressional leadership said, hey, if you stay in, you're going to cost us both houses of Congress. That has now happened, as Jonathan Martin just detailed. Coordinated leaks, seemingly coordinated leaks yesterday, coming at the end of 3 weeks, where President Biden and his team have really tried to turn the page, tried to show that he's still up for the job. He's delivered some successful performances, but it seems like Democrats simply haven't bought it. So what do you think as he now isolates in Delaware? How does this next week or so play out?
You know, it occurred to me that this is the 50th anniversary of the debut of Rubik's Cube, that device that drove many of us crazy. And the Democrats are facing a classic Rubik's Cube issue. Whatever they try to do to adjust this, the other side says, wait a minute, what about that? Well, let's get rid of Biden. Well, you're going to have hundreds of delegates who are unhappy about that. If you put Kamala Harris in, a lot of Democrats think she's going to run no better than Biden. But if you try to create a fresh team, the most loyal base of the Democratic Party is going to say, wait a minute, now that there's a black woman vice president, she can't step up to the top. And The only thing that occurs to me that is mildly encouraging to Democrats is I think back to 1968 when Hubert Humphrey came out of a bitterly divided convention, 15 points behind Richard Nixon with no money, and came up within a point of winning. You know, had Nixon not traitorously played games with the South Vietnamese government, Humphrey could have won. But to try to figure out a way out in an era where there are no power brokers that can say, here's the ticket. If they try a mini primary, a kind of, competition, like a talent show at the Democratic convention, they are right now, I think, in an incredible pickle. And the one saving grace for them is the country still doesn't want to put Donald Trump back in the White House. There is a road to victory, but trying to figure out how that works with all these different Rubik's Cube turns, frankly, I don't have a good answer to that either.
So it appears Donald Trump, as Jeff just said, Simone, has a ceiling, which for Democrats could be good news. A fresh team would be completely unknown. A fresh team would be completely untested. A fresh team would not have had the experience of how to beat Donald Trump, and a fresh team would not be vetted. So to me, that leaves you with Vice President Kamala Harris. She has her strengths, and I would say on the debate stage, she has tremendous strength, and she has perceived weaknesses. The question I would have, is this the most seamless way to go? And would she have the backing of former presidents and donors right away? What would be the most seamless?
Well, I mean, honestly, Mika, the most seamless is that everybody just backs up and Joe Biden stays on the ballot. But it feels like, and let me just tell you, I talked to a lot of delegates over the last 24 to 48 hours, a lot of DNC members, some of my former colleagues, and where the people are within the party is the delegates at the convention are saying they are still backing Joe Biden. They are true blue delegates. And what I've heard people say is that they don't understand what is happening in terms of why is our family business, as someone said to me, playing out on national television. And so that's one piece. The other piece, though, is it seems like the tide is really flowing against the president. And he is resolute. And the opposition to his candidacy is resolute. So the question becomes, in this standoff, who is going to blink first? And in the event that President Biden blinks, he is saying right now, his people are saying he is not blinking, he is in this, and I 1,000% believe what they're saying. That is how he feels, and that is how they all feel. We had Quentin Folks on last night. But in the event that, Joe Biden is like, I don't swim, as long as I can swim, I can't swim against this tide anymore. I do think the vice president is the only natural choice. From what I have heard from folks, there's a lot of concern from DNC members about the money and what could be raised. I have heard from people that said, well, I don't think the vice president can win. And Jeff made a point that I want to underscore. What does it say? What does it say to the base of the Democratic Party apparatus that yes, a black woman can be vice president of the United States of America, but she cannot have the top job? There's just something about it that says she can't do the work, even though she's been doing the work. When the United States got into a little tussle with France because of the submarines in Australia, it was Vice President Harris that the president asked to go to France and smooth things over with President Macron. Before Putin invaded Ukraine, it was Vice President Harris that went to the Munich Security Conference and, again, gave a rousing rallying cry and warned our European allies about what was to happen and how the United States was going to lead. And so I don't understand it, Mika, this conversation about anybody other than the vice president. And I think the last thing I'll say is if, in fact, Joe Biden can't swim against the tide anymore, it would behoove him, I think, to come out strongly and say what he has been saying. Every time he's been asked about the vice president in the last week, he said, I think she can be president. So Joe Biden should say, in my opinion, if you want me out, you need to show me a plan to make sure it's her. And until I see that, I'm not going.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.